likely remember our previous video, the one where we talked Justin Gaethje for the interim lightweight title. This was a fight that promised fireworks, but it carried an underlying current of dread for anyone who understood the circumstances. Tony Ferguson, known for being one of the toughest, most unorthodox fighters in the sport, found himself in an absolutely terrible situation. The original Khabib fight was scheduled for early April. When that fell through, and the Gaethje fight was set for May, Ferguson made a decision that would prove incredibly costly. He cut weight for the Khabib fight, only for it to be cancelled. Then, less than a month later, he had to go through another full weight cut for Justin Gaethje. Think about that for a second. 2 brutal weight cuts in less than 4 weeks. For those unfamiliar with the process, cutting weight in MMA is not just uncomfortable, it's physically devastating. Fighters often shed significant amounts of water weight, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. The dangers of dehydration, especially repeated dehydration in such a short span, cannot be overstated. When a fighter dehydrates, their brain actually shrinks slightly inside their skull. This means that when they take a punch, the brain has more room to move around, increasing the likelihood of it sloshing against the inside of the skull. This leads to far greater damage from blows, more severe concussions, and a higher risk of long-term neurological issues. Essentially, Tony Ferguson was walking into that fight against Justin Gaethje not just physically drained, but with his brain already compromised, making him incredibly vulnerable to any significant impact. It was a recipe for disaster, and sadly, that's exactly what unfolded. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The stage was set for UFC 249, but it was unlike any event before it. The arena was eerily silent, devoid of the usual roaring crowd, a stark reminder of the global pandemic. In this sterile environment, Tony Ferguson stepped into the octagon, his body doubly dehydrated from those 2 weight cuts in quick succession. Across from him stood Justin Gaethje, a man known for his heavy hands, explosive power, and a relentless fighting style that had earned him a string of impressive victories. Gaethje wasn't just a brawler. He had a sharp mind for the sport, guided by his coach, Trevor Wittman, one of the most respected trainers in MMA. Wittman had crafted a precise game plan for Gaethje, one designed to exploit Ferguson's notoriously porous defense. Tony, for all his toughness and offensive creativity, often absorbed a lot of punches to land his own. Gaethje's strategy wasn't about a quick knockout, but about accumulated damage. He would use precise counter punches, targeting Ferguson's chin and temples, slowly but surely breaking him down. The empty arena meant every punch landed with a sickening thud. Every instruction from the corner echoed clearly, creating a uniquely intense atmosphere. From the first bell, the fight was a violent spectacle. Gaethje began to land, his power evident in every connection. Ferguson, true to form, pressed forward, absorbing blows that would put most fighters down, yet still pushing the pace, trying to find his rhythm. He showed incredible resilience, his chin seemingly made of iron. However, Gaethje initially made a crucial error. He started overcommitting to his power shots, trying to finish Ferguson too early, perhaps getting caught up in the moment. This momentary lapse in discipline almost cost him dearly. Towards the end of the second round, Ferguson, with a flash of his old brilliance, landed a powerful uppercut that sent Gaethje tumbling to the canvas. It was a shocking moment, a reminder of Ferguson's ability to turn the tide in an instant. As the bell rang for the end of the round, Trevor Wittman's voice cut through the silence. He was firm, direct, and exactly what Gaethje needed. Wittman reminded Gaethje about the game plan. Precision over power, stick to the strategy, accumulate damage. He urged him to stop hunting for the knockout and instead focus on landing clean, accurate shots. It was a pivotal moment in the fight, a coaching masterclass that refocused Gaethje and set the course for the rest of the bout. From round 3 onward, the fight shifted dramatically. Gaethje, having recalibrated, began to execute Wittman's plan flawlessly. He moved with controlled aggression, picking his shots with surgical precision. Each punch landed with purpose, chipping away at Ferguson's defenses, his brain already compromised by the weight cuts. The sound of Gaethje's fists connecting became more frequent, more impactful. Ferguson's face started to show the brutal effects of the beating. His features began to deform, his eyes swelling, his movements becoming slower, more labored. He was still fighting, still throwing wild, desperate strikes. But it was clear he was running on pure instinct and an almost superhuman will. He was barely standing, yet he refused to go down. The 4th round continued the relentless assault. By the 5th round, it was clear the fight needed to be stopped. Ferguson was a warrior, but he was taking too much damage. Gaethje, relentless and precise, landed a devastating left hook that snapped Ferguson's head back. Tony stumbled, his body unresponsive, his eyes glazed over. He was still on his feet, but he was out on his feet. The referee, witnessing the brutal impact and Ferguson's delayed reaction, stepped in immediately, waving off the fight. It was a standing knockout, a merciful stoppage that saved Ferguson from further, potentially career-ending punishment. For the first time in 7 years, Tony Ferguson had lost a fight. It was a crushing defeat, not just for him, but for the fans who had hoped to see him finally face Khabib. This fight, this brutal beating, marked the end of an era and the beginning of a tragic decline. The brutal reality of the fight was clear. Justin Gaethje, the new interim lightweight champion, had delivered the worst beating in UFC history to Tony Ferguson. Gaethje's victory led him to the highly anticipated unification bout against Khabib Nurmagomedov. That fight, too, was a display of dominance, with Khabib securing a submission victory before famously retiring undefeated, leaving behind a legacy that would be hard to match. But the story of Tony Ferguson after the Gaethje fight is where the true tragedy lies. The damage inflicted that night was not just physical. It was a profound blow to his mental fortitude and his fighting spirit. The man who stepped into the Octagon against Charles Oliveira months later was a shadow of his former self. He lacked the aggression, the relentless pressure, the almost insane confidence that had defined his career. Oliveira, a submission specialist, dominated Ferguson, securing a submission win that further cemented Ferguson's decline. It was almost as if the fire that burned so brightly within him had been extinguished by Gaethje's fists. The double weight cuts, the compromised brain, and the sustained punishment had taken an irreversible toll. His next opponent was Beneil Dariush. Again, Ferguson looked different. He was tentative, hesitant, a far cry from the whirlwind of elbows and unpredictable attacks he was once known for. Dariush controlled the fight easily, out-grappling and out-striking Ferguson for a clear decision victory. There were no flashes of the old Tony, no moments where he seemed to turn the tide with sheer will. He was simply outmatched, outthought, and outfought. It was painful to watch for anyone who had followed his career, a stark reminder of how quickly a fighter's prime can fade, especially after such a brutal encounter. Then came the fight against Michael Chandler, a former Bellator champion known for his explosive power. This fight ended in a devastating knockout, a front kick to the face that sent Ferguson crashing to the canvas. It was a highlight reel finish for Chandler, but for Ferguson, it was another painful chapter in his post-Gaethje career. The image of him lying motionless on the canvas was a stark contrast to the iron-chinned warrior who had absorbed countless blows just 2 years prior. Each loss chipped away, not only at his record, but at the very essence of what made him El Cucuy. His 5th consecutive loss came against Nate Diaz. By this point, the lack of soul, the absence of that aggressive, almost maniacal intensity, was undeniable. Ferguson fought, but he fought without the spark, without the desperation that once made him so dangerous. Diaz, known for his ability to withstand punishment and wear down opponents, secured a submission victory, adding another defeat to Ferguson's increasingly bleak record. It was clear that the Tony Ferguson who entered the Octagon that night against Gaethje would never fully return. The resilience, the endless cardio, the ability to absorb and keep coming, it had all been eroded. The tragic legacy of the Khabib vs. Ferguson fight is that it never happened. It remains one of the greatest what-ifs in UFC history, a dream fight that was cursed from the start. The fight that was supposed to finally bring them together ended up burying the possibility forever. Tony Ferguson's career was irrevocably altered by that night against Justin Gaethje. Had the Khabib vs. Ferguson fight happened in their primes, it would have been an absolute war. Speculation always leans towards Khabib winning, given his undefeated record and dominant grappling. But Ferguson, with his unique style and incredible toughness, would have undoubtedly inflicted significant damage, making it a truly memorable contest. Instead, the Khabib vs. Ferguson saga joins other dream fights, like John Jones vs. Anthony Johnson, that only exist in the imagination of fans or within the digital confines of video games. It stands as a testament to the unpredictable, often cruel nature of combat sports, where a single night, a single beating, can change everything. Tony Ferguson, once a top contender, became a cautionary tale. His career a stark reminder of the cost of pushing the human body beyond its limits.